Carol and I walked absent-mindedly throughout the city streets for some time as we relied on Otis as our navigator. He wasn't ahead of the path, going at the same pace as me and my sister. All he did was tell us in what general direction to proceed. The cluster of buildings made it hard for him to distinguish where the hoofbeats were coming from, but there came a fleeting moment when even I could detect the sound and rushed forward on my own. Naturally, anyone else with ears as weak as mine and Carol's would have found themselves lost in the city's cacophony of countless footsteps, voices, and other assorted noises, at which point the two of us found ourselves misguided again. There came a time when Otis's ovine ears, professed for being so sensitive, failed him as well, though there was no way his senses could be the be-all and end-all to this expedition's success. As we reach an area more populated than the neighborhood surroundings, the wasp base, his gait slowed, falling behind. Are you sure about this? Come on. What makes you change your mind now? You're not discouraged, are you? No, just that I'm getting awfully hungry. I sympathized with him more than the stiffness in my legs and the ache in my feet. I couldn't fight the deep hunger that pained me from the moment I chose to skip breakfast. But I couldn't say anything. The complaint would have been to give in. I would find food soon enough, just as I hoped Otis would. Same here, but we'll get something after a while, no sweat. The mutual feeling is what kept me from uttering something in the vein of what Melanie might bring up to him in a time like this. Really, it wasn't too unlike the time Melanie dragged the two of us through the streets in order for Otis to feast upon flesh again. This time, I was the one carrying him along. Done here. As we faced the crossroads, his voice went hushed as he strained himself. No, wait. He tumbled around in a dizzy circle as his ears pointed all about. I'm getting lost again. Are we still even following Melanie? I swear I heard hoofbeats a little while ago, but there's a lot of commotion going on nearby. The typical sounds of the city could be heard from here, with the latest being the softest footsteps from the passerby surrounding us, moving in every direction. It was in the distance that the anomaly was present. It sounded almost like a shower hitting the ground. Seeing gray clouds covering the sky, it wasn't unlikely that rain was upon us. Is it the rain? Rain now? What bad luck. It's not the rain. Otis pointed his ears along with his face to the source of the sound, focusing for a second before tilting his head from side to side. It's just more footsteps. Really? Suddenly, the tone of the sound shifted. Once a steady flow of fuzzy noise blended together with no coherency, there came to be a rhythm within the same quality of sound. It was the same sound, supposedly like footsteps to Otis, but like a distant sprinkle to me, now with a split second of silence between each brief stream of noise. It became apparent to me that the weather phenomenon could not be this calculated. Many people walked independently of one another throughout this street, and many people walked simultaneously, but not in any sort of cooperated effort. In the distance was a crowd marching in unison. I took a step towards where Otis looked, enticed by curiosity yet again. A count? Right. Until we made it here. You usually heard an elk somewhere nearby, right? That's right. This might be what Melanie was looking for. In a place like this, no group of average people would be able to organize a march without the moth interfering. Let's go. Having taken a moment to stop and regain the smallest ounce of my energy, I darted off again, with Otis and Carol trailing behind me. I had little doubt Carol's nimble, active body could keep up with me, though Otis's bulky figure, debilitated by hunger, was where I found my silent pity. Although I couldn't bring myself to seem deterred, I wished he had a chance to rest, refuel, and recharge, because that was what I hungered for just as much. A fatigue surged through me not long after I tried to dismiss it. Perhaps soon enough, however, the sound I pursued grew clearer and louder as I walked. Even with my gasp for breath in the foreground as I knelt over, it then became entirely clear. A large crowd of people marched throughout the streets, though the rhythm faded in favor of cacophony again as the group became disorganized, varying the timing and speed of their paces. But among this, an isolated pair of footsteps echoed off the wall of the buildings surrounding me. I looked up, but before I could think any more on who approached us, I looked back to get a glimpse of her sprinting past and far away from us. It was the same dainty young girl with short dark hair who I saw each time with Berserk. Wait, that was... Her companion wasn't with her. With her in sight, I at least knew this encounter had to be related to Melanie's recent goal. Unless Erica wasn't anywhere nearby either. But there she appeared before me, in the blink of an eye, in a flash of light, as I stood up and looked to her in surprise. Erica's ursine visage stared back to me, but what I could only assume was the same sort of surprise. Count, Otis, why are you all here? It was like I was talked down to, though she displayed more concern than Melanie ever did. She had just as much resentment for my actions in her accusatory tone to that. I had no response to give. Erica, it's okay. What makes you say that? Is she might be... You need to worry about yourselves for now, alright? She'll be fine. Have you eaten anything, Otis? I wish. Then stay out of the moss way. Pulled out of her brief conversation, the golden bear rushed off on all fours in the direction the dark-haired girl went. She didn't give us any more information or guidance, but I understood there was only so much one could do for a group as rash as us. I looked back once the girl came. Before us, there, the moth was. Not a soldier, not a squadron. It's more large. It may as well have been the entire Master Order trained higher, in all its glory, filling the gap in the crossroads before me, flooding the street with a wave of stomps and shouts. Many diverged from the cluster upon spotting us and came our way. Without thinking, Carol was the first to run down the same path Erica took with the other girl. Otis and I were soon to follow. A chase ensued. Through the streets we ran, in corners we hid. In either event, the moth caught up to us every time. Never in my life would I have thought that I, of all people, would be on the run from the police, especially with the force in this strong in numbers. However, compared to the rest of the mob that seemed to be uninterested in us, the crowd that followed us looked small. I could only assume Erica was the greater priority. They obviously meant business, with how little hesitation they showed to go after me at all. The muffled crowd could be heard just outside the abandoned building that Otis, Carol, and I found to take cover in, but it sounded like they were passing us by. Here, we had a moment to rest, sitting in shade on the floor, illuminated only by the traces of dispersed light shining in through the windows. My hands rested on Otis's shoulder as we both did everything in our power to regulate our breaths, racing against our own hearts. Avoiding his horns concealed behind the ribbon, I put my forehead to his, noticing each drop of sweat upon his face through my cloudy vision. I wish you could read my mind. I wish you could see my desperation. I wish you could make that which I hoped for come true. None of that was possible now. We were away from the threat for now, but it felt as if I may have been the one to die now. I was never forgotten and never forgiven in the eyes of authority, all because I sought peace. I'm sorry. He could barely speak, uttering breathless words. Don't say that. I'll forgive you. Oh. I was so absorbed in my sentimentality that I didn't notice Carol standing up to stare at the entryway into this room. In the entrance stood Louise, complete with her crossbow, ready like always. You couldn't run for long. Brave of you to interfere with us now. My head swayed side to side, and my mind went numb, unable to form any response. I used the last of my energy to stand and face her. Otis was left exhausted on the floor. Please, you think? I don't know you have no power. I didn't intend to intimidate her as much as I was. Ready to accept my fate, there was nothing more I could do to save us. If you had any, you would have done more than run. Why you follow us out here? Only a few of our members were reported dead yesterday. Were you just that determined to stop us from taking the Earth Sign Science? To rush in head first? There's no way you could take us on without altering science. You think you're so smart, but you didn't think this through, did you? I hate to break it to you, but another plan of yours has been foiled. Scientific alteration is going to be in our hands soon. It was apparent enough that the whole crowd was after Erica. Once that bear has been captured, we'll finally be able to put an end to your outrage. Is that what you think your run crew is going to do with it? Carol gave Louise the harshest scowl I had ever seen her give anyone. After all this time, you think you stand for justice? You still think you can't do anything wrong? Louise found herself unable to confront Carol, of all people, as if Louise still had to apologize to her, despite only adding insult to injury as she confronted me with Carol as a witness. Carol Canavos, the group you sided with, has caused nothing but misery for me and my comrades, and now after joining the same cause, your brother is toying with death. This is all we can do to defend ourselves after you went and tried to tear our family apart. And the Berserk, I don't know what he's been through, but he had the right idea from the start. The moth is better off dead anyway. Unforgivable. Carol reached to draw her sword from its sheath and aimed the blade to Louise. Carol, we'll put a stop to you here and now. She took a wide stance to grip the sword with both hands and hold it to her side, bracing every muscle in her body. Letting out a cry, she charged at Louise. I had no power to stop any tragedy that would unfold here. But that tragedy did not come. I would have thought Louise would be quick to fire an arrow, but she allowed Carol to overtake her. While Carol wrapped her arms around Louise and the two struggled for dominance, I caught a clearer glimpse of the empty quiver on Louise's back. Knocked to the ground was her crossbow with her last arrow loaded in it. Carol was not the real threat to Louise. Carol was nothing more than a nuisance who advocated me. Carol never took action before now, and so Louise couldn't bring herself to waste the effort on her. Louise grew still as Carol stood behind her with the blade underneath her chin. Not so tough now, are you? Louise raised her chin and spoke up. What will you gain in killing me now? You're harmless for the time being. But you were wrong to say we're powerless now. With you here, I can have a wish granted. Those words reinvigorated me, although this was not the most pleasant surprise. Carol? Use me like you intended from the beginning, huh? Carol, I know you're hungry, Otis. Or would you rather have a count be the one to make a wish? With a forced smirk on her face, her entire body trembled as she spoke, unable to keep the sword level. What would we do now? Stop them off, naturally. She repeated the same thing time and time again, with no clear direction. It's no use. By now, the rest of my team has already closed in on Ursine science. There's simply no way you'll be able to stand up against it. We've just got to be quick, then. Kara became unable to control her violent shaking. It looked as if Louise could escape her fragile grasp at any second. That's just what happened. He let go and pushed Louise with both hands, sending her stumbling my way right before tossing the sword to me. I count. Without thinking, I reached out to catch the sword by the handle, as Louise bumped into me. Before I knew it, and before she could get away, as she tried to turn around, I was the one holding the sword to her neck. I didn't intend to kill her as much as I did, but I could, in the heat of the moment, prevent her escape. Carol lowered her face into her hands. It's on you. As much as she asserted her determination, and as much as I feared her motives, I knew there was no way she could ever find the heart to kill anyone. And yet she gave the task to me. Aside from my racing heart, my body was entirely still. Louise, trembling, emanated against me. She talked tough, but couldn't hide her innate fear. I had a talk with Melanie. She told me all about it. If the moth gets a hold of Ursine science, there's no way it's going anywhere but straight to the lunatic called Latat. You're right. He followed our assembly from afar. Carol gasped. Don't you think anything strange of him? I have more faith in him than in the likes of you. He'll do something about you. Then you'll be getting what you had coming. Carol looked to me with her anger shifting to concern. She couldn't stop shaking, stuttering all the while. Count, you saw how Latat acted back at the boss base. Even before that, you saw what he ordered the girl in your hand now to do to me. You saw what happened to Otis. That's not the kind of person you want with unlimited power. If he gets Ursine science, it might as well be all over. Otis is the only thing we can use now to stop him. I turned to look at Otis as he stood up, eyeing me in silence. He was hungry. I had a wish. I wish he could read my mind. I wish he could see my desperation. I wish for a preposterous future to be granted to Anonia, where we wouldn't have to run or fight like this under the greed and whim of a madman. Count, you're listening to me, right? You understand what you have to do, don't you? Those wishes wouldn't come true until Otis consumed the fuel. I tensed my hand, clutching the handle of the sword tighter and inching it closer to Louise's neck. My entire My entire body went hot as sweat dampened the side of my face. I understand. I couldn't bring myself to make a move. In spite of the circumstances before me, I still had a choice. You don't intend to spare this girl at the cost of the quality of life for everyone in Nonia, do you? Or do you still sympathize with the police for whatever reason you think she's in the right? Well, Count, who do you side with? Who is the true bearer of misfortune? While Carol looked to me with her eyes narrowed and brow lowered, Otis stared devoid of emotion at me. He expressed nothing to indicate if I should or should not commit this act. He wanted me to decide. I guess everything came down to this. Vernonia or spell Lupine? I spared you once and you betrayed me. It would be in everyone's best interests to withhold the tyranny bound to break free upon the city. That was what I decided. Despite how logical the decision was, I found myself hesitating to move my hand anymore. But now was the time to act. You're going to do it, aren't you? Yeah, just don't act like you've never struck anyone down when you were in the moth. In truth, as skilled as I became with a sword, I never had the chance to do that. For better or worse, not even know I took out anyone in front of me. Was my life really that easy all this time? So peaceful that I never even needed to consider the necessity of killing for the sake of survival. I fought my own circumstances, but never other people. Every person I did face was never more than a nuisance. Noah prepared me for many things, but not this. Not the most basic of skills, and not the very thing a sword is for. Otis continued to gaze directly into my eyes, yet it was like he wasn't looking at me at all. Like our bond had become so distant in his mindless hunger. Could I let him feast and see into my mind once more? Count, what's wrong with you? What makes you so afraid of getting rid of some stupid cop? Do you think you have some kind of conscience now? Like you'd be a better person if you let her go? This isn't about you. Yet, Carol still couldn't be the one to do what she wanted to do. You don't even know her, do you? What did she ever do for your sake? Can you think of any moment where you felt anything at all for her? What's so special about her? I had to admit, she had a point. Louise and I exchanged few words since we met. She wasn't particularly interested to me. The only things I knew about her was that she liked lemonade and that her supervisor suffered the same fate as mine. But that was it. She really was a dull character, wasn't she? Melanie told me that. I need to be afraid of what the Tat will do, that he'll rain unspeakable havoc. Doesn't that scare you? I don't want to be afraid, Count. Don't do it for me. Do it for everyone in the city. I took a deep breath to consider one last time what my final verdict would be. Carol was right. Otis was hungry. I had a wish in mind. The Tat had to be stopped. Louise was good for nothing. I clenched the sword tighter, my heart racing all the while. As I put the blade right to Louise's neck and slid it across, I slit her throat, washing the blade and drenching the front of her uniform in blood. With her eyes squeezed shut, she couldn't muster a scream, only choking on air. The pain she would feel was what I worried about the most, and I failed to make it painless. I twisted and jabbed the blade back across the gash in the front of her neck, to which it went limp as her head tilted to the side. Her legs began to give in as only my grasp supported her. I stepped back to let her fall, though it wasn't until I pierced her abdomen, wasting no time withdrawing the sword from her body, that she collapsed, made a thud against the floor. I wanted to make sure I did the job right, and could only hope I delivered this time. With her eyes unflinching, almost but not quite closed, Louise ceased to move, and a puddle of blood began to spread from underneath her. I looked back to Carol. She lowered her face into her hands. I looked to Otis, and he gave me the radiant smile I wanted to see from him so badly. Is it finally lunch? Yeah, go for it. He skipped to the body and got down on his hands and knees as always, and so that pure appearance of his faded once more. A necessary evil. Before I knew it, his hands were exchanged for the claws. I still couldn't believe he possessed. I couldn't see his face from this angle, but his movements and sound told me that he was already hard at work. I was still starving, but this relief was my relief. I didn't mind what was happening. He was having lunch, and I was about to guarantee desire. What's done is done. What needs to be done should be tended to. The whole thing was still kind of gross, but whatever. Wishing for my own lunch right now wouldn't have been inappropriate. I couldn't help but feel that thought in the back of my mind, so I know I had a mission to complete. I would expel scientific alteration from Erica's body, eliminate Ursine's science, and end the king's pursuit for power. That way Otis and I be on top of the food chain again. Carol limped her way out of the room with her head hung low, leaving Otis to his meal. I went after her to meet in the hallway. Otis's chewing echoed in the background as we conversed. I wasn't sure if you could do it. She dropped to her knees on the floor for me to follow suit. That wasn't so bad now. Once he finishes eating, we're done for a while. A while? I'm going to wish for Erica to turn back to normal. After that, our biggest threat will be gone. But that won't be the end of the control the Tat already has over the city. We'll just stop him from doing too much more. The Wasp will still have a lot of work to do if we're to see this place in good condition again. But I know we can get it done. Just like how we accomplished this. He gave a nod. Hey, Carol. I'm glad you came with us. You really did prove your worth. Eh? It's true. I don't think I had been able to do what I just did if I didn't have you to convince me. You're quite fearsome. I gave her a chuckle. She giggled. Oh, thank you. I still have a lot of work to do, really. I appreciate the support. You're the one who got the job done. I'll go as far as to say you've finally given the city the justice you've always wanted to. This kingdom might as well be in your hands now. We fell silent as Otis continued to chomp away. Before too much longer, a sudden bang was heard from outside. I thought nothing of it, before another followed. I got up and went to peek through the nearest window. A series of bricks were dislodged, lying disarrayed about the road. As I tried to observe and understand if I was looking at anything peculiar, the bricks in the wall of the building across from us flew out of place. Catching sight of a stray brick flying towards the window, Carol and I jumped out of the way before the brick crashed inside, landing on the floor with shards of glass. I looked back to the room where Otis ate, and he was a step ahead of me, running towards me with a bloody face. Something going on? Are you about done? We need to get outside now. More than ready. With that, the three of us made our way out of the building and into the streets. The building beside the one we just exited wasn't the only one to fall victim to destruction without an apparent cause. As we escaped, the corner of the same building toppled over, filling the streets with more dust. In the corner of my eye, shining through the rising dust, I saw blue and gold light flash by a nearby intersection. Speak of the devil. The destruction I saw before me was almost comical. but it was nothing that couldn't be undone. Otis, are you ready? He was covering his ears, but he must have understood my gist as he shouted at me over the noise. I hear you loud and clear, in more ways than one. Excellent, I wish. Like that, the power of Earth and science was taken away from the Tat's hands. As Erica returned to normal, it was as if nothing ever happened. From there, she found it easy enough to escape and reunite with my crew. Even so, gratitude was not what Erica expressed to me. Why? I couldn't fathom, but she spoke to me with dismay before rushing off to rejoin her own small squadron of rebels. At least I finally earned Melanie's approval. There was no way to predict what Erica's next plan of action would be, but it was no matter. I learned that I had no more need for her or the Berserk, though they were free to do as they pleased. I was confident I made the right choice, because it was my own. The Tat held his status as king, though respected by many in the Master Order trained higher, who would continue to oppress in his name, but he wouldn't be able to maintain that role for long. Power was in my hands now. I would be the one to take back the throne with Otis at my side. The blood wasn't washed off of Otis after we altered science, and I was playing dirty myself, so we ended up taking another shower together once we were able to make it back to the headquarters of the Wasp. Having finally gotten settled after getting something to eat, we were both exhausted enough to retire to our bedroom together right afterward. It may not have been my bedroom, at least, not for much longer, but I had to admit, it took on a comfort that grew on me since I first arrived, and I would miss it if I were to leave it behind one day. After all, it was the bedroom where I was able to spend time with Otis, a person I was uncertain of when we first met, who eventually came to be my pride and joy over the course of this alienating adventure. Though now, even amidst my celebration, he took on a solemn attitude, even as he lay next to me on top of the bed. Hey, account? What is it? You know, I looked into your mind again. It was interesting, to say the least. I think I finally come to understand of you. Someone who understood me was what I wanted for the longest time, though at first uncomfortable. I came to see his insight into my very being as a blessing. Have you really? Well, almost. You see, there's something I still haven't been able to figure out. I like to think that I would have an understanding of you if I knew the answer to one thing. Oh, go on, ask away. I thought I already laid myself bare, though revealing one more thing couldn't have hurt. It might be kinda weird of me to ask this, but do you love me? What a strange question to ask indeed. It was considerably strange that of everything he saw in my mind, he was unable to read deep enough to comprehend my feelings for him. But maybe he was right. To ponder because, come to think of it, I didn't know myself. This was something I pondered recently. Him aside, I often ponder just what love even is, and above all, if what I felt for Noah could have been called love. Noah, that's right. He was my object of desire before Otis came into my life, though I took a liking to Otis after accepting that Noah's affection was no longer in my reach. What desire did I have for Noah? Did Otis fulfill my desires instead? That was what I had to take another moment to ponder before expressing my honest thoughts to Otis. Sure. I tried to deny what I felt before, but when confronted with his inquiry, I realized I couldn't run from the truth like I tried to so many times before. Otis? Yeah? That's right. I love you. I felt an immense weight lifted from my chest. but his gaze into my eyes were broken only by his fluttering eyelids. Really? It's true. I don't know why you'd be so confused about that. He got up, moved over to sit at the edge of the bed, looking down at his hanging feet as he kept rambling. But you thought a lot of Noah. What about him? You miss him, don't you? He was a dear friend of mine. I missed him, once upon a time. What I felt for Noah was nothing more than infatuation. He was my superior. I was his subordinate. We were co-workers, nothing more. It was Otis who showed me a love that I could have never hoped for Noah to give me. He was just a friend once. Don't you feel sad? You were horrified to see me devouring him, even though you wanted something out of me, and still want something out of me. I guess that's what I'm confused about. I got up and moved over to sit beside him and reach for his hand between us. It was terrifying. I was terrified of what you were trying to do because I didn't understand what was happening. It took some time for me to accept things. Maybe Noah did die for a reason, so I could learn of our potential together. We've harnessed death and overcome chaos. Soon that would allow us to change the city for the better. It was just what Joanne claimed her life consisted of, but in a more literal sense. You did more for me than I would have thought. You gave me another chance after I thought I was about to lose my life to chaos. That's why I love you. His mouth went ajar. Were those tears he was wiping from his eyes? What is that? What's your problem? It's nothing. I'm just happy. And I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure you stay happy. You won't have to try very hard to do that. I really appreciate everything you do for me. If someone can see everything I do, peer into all of my thoughts, from an understanding of an appreciation for who I am and what I undergo, then I wholeheartedly welcome that person into my heart. That alone was enough, although granting my wish was a bonus. It was a miracle to have found anyone capable of that. Truly, Otis was a miracle. I could say the same of you. We turned to each other and embraced once more. We'll make tomorrow productive, alright? For sure. Everything I can for you. I awoke in the morning just as I always had. With my fatigue from yesterday dissipated, I slept well. Today was a big day, considering all I still had to do in order to resume my conquest for sovereignty over the moth's domain. But whether sooner or later, I was confident my endeavors wouldn't be without success. With that in mind, I rolled over onto my face and clenched my pillow, still wanting to hold on to the chance for the rest I had. I tried to reflect on a dream or nightmare I may have had last night, but was unable to recall anything. Those were the best mornings to wake up to, and this was the kind of morning I hadn't seen in far too long. Then I realized what was missing from this moment, aside from remembering that my success was dependent on Otis. That is, I realized as I sat up and looked around that Otis wasn't in sight. We usually woke up around the same time, didn't we? Breakfast must have been really worth it this time, assuming that I threw the covers off me and stepped onto the floor. There was no reason to hurry, nothing to disturb or distract me. I finally felt at ease while getting dressed and groomed. Maybe Otis wasn't around because I woke up later than usual. While my schedule in the mouth was bearable, it was doubtful Noah would have ever let me get away with that. If this was the case, it was surprising that even Carol didn't bother me now. Breakfast was going to be a great start to a productive day. With my appearance and mind in order, I opened the door and walked out wearing a grin. No one was in the hallway, nor was anyone in the living room. Entering the kitchen, no one was there either. There was no food anywhere out in the open. All the plates set out had only crumbs on them. Among what little there was, coffee, resting in one of the cups on the counter, giving off no steam against the chilling air. Was everyone on the roof? I was in no hurry, so I paced myself as I went for the stairs, walked up, and looked around. The only one up there was me. Did everyone leave without me? My worry was eased as one member of the boss, who I had never spoke to, passed me by, back in the halls, and I just happened to miss where people were as I walked around and searched for them. At my time back at our houses, both before and during my time in the mall, there were many times when I may have needed Carol or her father and couldn't find them because they were wandering to find me as much as I was looking for them. It was hardly the strangest coincidence. The last place I checked was Carol's room. We talked to each other more than enough while with the wasp, though we most often let the other be when one of us went to our rooms. Personal space was something we both valued and respected long before we came here, but I would have to break that unspoken tradition for now. Arriving at her door, I knocked on it. I knocked once more. There was no response. I twisted the knob and pushed the door slightly open. Carol? Still no reply. I entered and still neither her nor anyone else was there. Would she or Otis be in Joanne's room? Maybe even Melanie's room. It would make at least some sense for Otis to be with Melanie. However, I was still distant enough from both Melanie and Joanne that it would be awkward for me to knock on their doors and try to talk to them. No, that wouldn't have been possible. I doubted Carol had gotten to know any other members of the society well enough to hang around any of their rooms. Otis was an even less likely candidate for that. Maybe one of them, if not both of them, were in the bathrooms. With nowhere else to check, I made my way back to the living room, then to the kitchen, to get the same result as earlier. A few others inhabited the space, but not any one of my concern. If they went somewhere without me, there would be no way of catching up to them at this point. I guess if they went outside, they would have been back inside before long. With nothing to do, I found myself strolling through the halls again. I passed by the door that led to the small containment room. No, that would be strange. Or not so strange at all, if the two were already getting to work on the goals everyone had in mind since yesterday. I pulled the door open, expecting to find nothing inside. Oh, oh, oh no. Oh, oh no. My sister, no. Oh god, not his sister, not the last of his family. Oh god. Oh no. I had just begun to regain my faith in reality, yet I couldn't believe what I saw. There was nothing I could bring myself to say. I couldn't scream. I couldn't even let out a gasp as I found myself trying and failing to so much as breathe. I felt myself on the verge of collapsing as my heart raced. I couldn't stand still or look straight forward. My vision went blurry, almost as if voluntarily in direct response to my wish to have seen nothing. Getting off the ground with his back to me, Otis then turned around, his appearance as unclean as ever. Oh, there you are, Count. His bright expression didn't change, even as he looked me in the eyes, like he couldn't read the shock on my face. I was just getting the head stuff, anything you might want to ask for today. Just like the first time, it was nothing to him, too much for me. Behind him, partially obstructed by his stance, but still more than revealing enough, was my sister. With her head turned away from him, flat on the floor, top a pool of scarlet surrounding her, her clothes torn to shreds, her limbs ungracefully spread, her body half missing, her insides are what was left of them exposed. With my eyes wide and to the floor, I collapsed to my knees. Eh? What's up with you? That was the kind of question I would have asked him. There was nothing to say to that. You wanted to grant some more of your wishes, right? We were gonna get more stuff done. Why? What do you mean, why? Just taking after your lead. Tears flowed down my cheeks. I was unable to raise my voice, enough to express my unrelenting anger at him as I choked out what few words I could. Why her? How could you? Thought I saw in your mind here and then that she was special to you, but I didn't know you'd take it this hard. Really, I figured you wouldn't care at all after what you did last night. How dare you? I just did what I thought was best. You thought she was nice to me, but you never read her mind, did you? How dare you? My mind was filled with nothing but malice. How dare you? You're a nice guy, Count. I wanted to be sure I wouldn't disappoint. That's why I've done everything I can for you. Her, on the other hand, she was a different story. How dare you say that about my sister? I raised my voice to the most aggressive shout I could muster, straining my throat, almost hurting my own ears. Otis flinched and took a step back as he reached both hands up to his ears before realizing my yell had already passed. I lifted my head and gave him a scowl before standing up. You did everything you could for me? And now this. What you pull on me? He returned to me the most disheartened expression I had ever seen from him. You're right, I'm sorry. I haven't done enough for you. That's why I thought this might be nice. You bastard. All I could mutter was through my teeth. I see your thoughts again there. Account. There was nothing more to console me with now. So why he bothered saying my name like that, I couldn't guess. He said we would be able to change the city for the better. As long as it makes you happy, I'll still make your wishes come true. Please tell me what it is you desire. He looked at me with anticipation. He had greater expectations than he ever sought from me beforehand. He wanted nothing more from me to give him an answer. More than anything, I wanted Carol to be revived. I learned the hard way that such feat was impossible. At this point, I couldn't say I cared that badly about the state of the city, really. I asked myself now if it would have been for the better that I didn't bother trying to save anything or anyone like I did yesterday. I wasn't concerned about what Tad had up his sleeve. Anything the mob did from now on would be insignificant. Whatever happened to anyone else was irrelevant. My sister was dead. That was all that mattered. I don't give a damn. Do whatever the hell you want. Just don't involve me ever again. You monster. Otis took a step back as he lowered his head and covered his eyes. He dragged his fingers from his forehead down his face and to his chin to show his wide eyes to me. He shouldn't have been so surprised that I lashed out the way I did. But then as he squinted, he looked confused. You're not thinking anything. Of course I wasn't thinking something. My thoughts were a whirlwind of raging emotion. If you can see something so obvious, you must have successfully altered science. No, I altered science. I didn't wish for anything, did I? No. I still feel full, but with his hand atop his head, his feet locked in place, he motions his head in a steady circle. I feel everything around me. He stopped to look down at his palms before lifting his head to the ceiling. A creaking noise came from above. It came louder as many more noises layered upon each other. Light shone from behind the ceiling before I could realize the cracks were forming and the breeze was falling to the floor. The bars of the ceiling all bent with a screech. Yeah, finally, I could think clearly. He closed his eyes. Light and dust engulfed the room. I shielded my eyes. One way or another, I was left blinded. I had to wait for the dust to settle before being able to look around again. The first thing I saw was Otis standing before me. He was clean, with no trace of blood on him. With each inch I came to see beyond his form, it looked as if the room was more spacious than it was a moment ago. Despite the illumination of my surroundings, no prison bars revealed themselves. No walls revealed themselves. Only the overcast sky was above us, and the streets surrounding the building polluted with rubble were past him. I've been set free, thank you, Account. It couldn't be, but it was. I realized the grave mistake I made. Somehow, I enabled him to alter science of his own accord. What's that look? No matter. I guess if you don't want me around, I don't have to be here anymore. I'm gonna see what all I can do now. I've said some things were exciting before, but this is exciting. He giggled. His devilish smirk was a mere mockery of the smile I once knew. I'm sure we'll bump into each other again. Catch you later. With that, he soared straight up into the air and out of sight. Panic filled every fiber of my being again. I couldn't catch a break. Wherever he went, I knew that the well-being of the city's people was the last thing on his mind. I had to find him, and I had to put a stop to him. Account! Melanie came up from behind me in a sudden turn of events. She was the first person I wanted to see, if only because she was the last person I could turn to. What's going on? How was I supposed to explain this to her? It's, not good. I'm not blind. Did you wish for this? What's this supposed to? She fell quiet upon catching a glimpse of Carol's body. I would assume you're not responsible for what happened to her. Maybe I was. I killed her the moment I decided to free that monster along with her. I didn't put her in her place and tell her that it was for the best not to listen to her plea. It was for the best not to set that the beast in the guise of a young man free. Your brother murdered her, but it's all my fault. I wanted so many things that he had no chance of ever delivering to me, and so... You still wished for something just now. There's no hiding that from me. All I told him was to go away. Out of nowhere, he staggered back. Then his place collapsed. But it was like he wanted that. Like he was the one who wished for it, and not me. Where did he go? He flew away, jumped into the air and disappeared. All he said was that he would see what he can do now. Melanie turned her back to me and hung her head. I didn't think it was possible. He stomped over to her blade hanging from what of its designated wall remained, standing and lifting the sword to examine it. He let out a gentle sigh. He didn't bother washing it off. I always cleaned it after I took care of a job for his sake. The day before yesterday, when I still thought I had something to hide from you all, was just one of the countless other times when I had to wash this blade. Now, sure enough, you've fallen down the same path as me. At first, so afraid, you quickly become a wolf. Do you feel guilty, Account? Don't. What he's about to do will be far worse than what you did. Far worse than anything I've ever done. Far worse than anything even Latat wanted to do. I wanted to bring justice to the innocent. That was my only intention. Though that brought nothing but misfortune. The Ovine Replica was a mistake. I made it, and it's time for me to atone. After making our preparations and departing on Elk, Melanie and I scouted all throughout the city to see to Otis's whereabouts. As everything with the wasp base appeared intact, property damage was the least of our concerns. Where did you see him run off to? At the reins of the Elk I found the other day. He talked down to one of the wasp members who I never spoke with, but who I recognized as one of our own. I was the one running from him. We already stumbled upon one who I thought safe to assume was one of Otis's victims, given how little of the body remained for us to find. That must have been the scene the young man looking up to us came from. Otis made a dent in the passerby of the street. Some of the victims were mob soldiers, which one might presume to be the Berserk's doing. However, Otis had no priority and no agenda, as Molly and I found people of all sorts who were attacked indiscriminately. But eventually he caught up to me. A few of the others grabbed someone and went that way. Grabbed. I doubted Otis was strong enough to whisk anyone away with ease. Yet that sounded like the only possibility, if he couldn't drag anyone along with the rest. That's what it looked like. The thing just picked him up and dashed off. He wasn't a quick walker either, or him running any faster than I remembered. But a silly little image in my mind, as much as I knew I should be afraid. Watch yourself. She kicked her heels back at the outside and forced the beast onward. There wasn't any more she could advise the young man. Whether at the base or outside, no one was safe. Compared to yesterday, steady trot, she was speedy with the mount today. I had to stay on, but she was the last person I felt close to. So I kept my arms around her, only as closely as I needed to, with my hands wrapped into fists. As it turned out, I was informed few people were around the base this morning, because Joanne and some other rebels went on a trip of their own. Finding her in one piece was obviously Melanie's main goal, before taking out Otis. Weaving our way between buildings, Melanie gave no regard to the pedestrians who ducked out of our way, as we kept our eyes peeled for anything at all. There wasn't a need to ask anyone else about what they saw, as Otis made it evident that he was on a straightforward path, though we couldn't discern where this would lead. The half-eaten corpses we came across were spaced several blocks away from each other, each one providing a marker for where that savage had been. Then we came across something of note. Melanie tugged back at the reins, forcing the elk to an abrupt stop. No. Beside us was a person splayed about across the bloodstained ground like any of our other findings. Showcasing a form decayed and indistinct, but made feminine by the long dark hair draped across the ground. Melanie leaped down from our mount, knelt over the body, and reached her hands to it. Seeing the victim's face wouldn't have helped me recognize her. Damn it. The long poncho over her riding outfit was enough. Melanie stood back up, going right for the elk. She never shed a tear, but I was still able to see her composure wavering at the sight of her grants. Melanie was a woman of priority, and she had a job to do. We rode off yet again. Seeing what happened to John, who I thought to be a skilled warrior, made me ask a pertinent question. Melanie, do you honestly think we'll be able to get to him? After everything that was happening, it looked like we didn't stand a chance against him. We're going to have to. Saying that doesn't make something any more feasible. How? Brute force is all I know. But if both of us are still alive, we may not even be the people he wants to go for. So there's a chance for us to negotiate with him. That It was hard to believe, but given how analytical she was, she may have had a point. Although Melanie, an unwavering heart, didn't strike me as the type to try to compromise with anyone so easily. One way or another, all we could do for now was ride until we reached him. We continued along the path, seeing that Otis set his markers in the middle of major streets rather than in smaller offshoots, laying the victims bare for anyone to see. At that point, following the road was the most we had to do. We entered central Nonia as larger throngs of people flocked through the streets around us. I made it close to this area yesterday with my now disbanded group, though we didn't get a chance to venture this far. It was a much less raggedy town than any of the districts we were situated in before, becoming acquainted with the Wasp. There were a few unkempt folks in plain, tattered clothing, but the majority of the district's denizens were groomed in tidy dress. It wasn't hard to guess a given person's financial status by their looks. I had been a part of both sides of this divide once before. It was now that I saw each side as one, vulnerable all the same. Before responding anything, I knew something was awry. Through Menley's lack of words as she brought the yacht to another halt and leaped off. She didn't need to examine anything, if I can tell what happened too. She simply needed an extra moment to mourn. I didn't have sentimental feelings for John, yet disappointment struck me upon witnessing the fate of someone who I knew for a shorter time, only because the few words we exchanged gave me a sense of empowerment in a time of trouble. The one on the ground this time was a woman in bright formal dress wear, now stained in dark red splattered across the ground, while the red upon her clothes was as vivid as her long disarrayed blonde hair that shimmered even now. Even her. Melanie's voice went quiet. She took her time standing over Erica's disfigured body. Neither of us could bring ourselves to say anything more. There was no analysis or quip she could provide to enlighten me. And she turned back to me to approach and mount the elk once more. I caught my first glimpse of her shedding tears. We continued on the same stretch of road we had been following. What we found next was not another corpse. We arrived at the central plaza at the very heart of the city. Surrounding the fountain at the center of the wide array of brick street was a variety of renowned businesses and public venues, all prestigious enough to match the pristine, elegant architecture bestowed upon the buildings lucky enough to be constructed here. Or that's what there used to be. It wasn't like this yesterday. There was no blood in the street, and no amount more would have been as much of a surprise as the sight before me. Most of the buildings were brought to the ground, with debris laying all about. Only the structure's foundations laid bare, and mountains of dust rose above anything else here. I didn't need to see blood to infer that countless lives had been lost in the damage done. But while I could see no one dead, I saw no one alive either. The scene before me was a desolate wasteland, and the city surrounded by both mountains and rows among rows of buildings. It wasn't often I felt the wind at ground level, yet it came howling by here. It was a vision of what was yet to come under Otis's newfound reign. What did Otis have to gain in leading us here? Was it only to taunt us? To insult us? Still, one question was stuck in my mind. How would Otis be stopped? Was it possible? After taking all in, and Lee charged off again. I couldn't have guessed where to, considering how many paths branched from this plaza. Then I noticed a sign of life just beyond it, on the road to the palace. A crowd of people standing close together, clad in red. Approaching them, they turned to us, and murmur resounded throughout the group. As the elk stopped in front of them, the soldiers parted, revealing to me what they were surrounding. Serving as Otis's last marker, Latat lay dead and devoured before us. I got what I wanted. It wasn't worth the price I paid. Why have you done this? You think this is justice? You traitor! There was no way to tell that their cries were over the death of the tat or the destruction of the plaza. Their commotion told me they didn't understand what was happening, or who was to blame either way. I couldn't prove myself innocent any time before, so I was as helpless this time as any other. Listen. Only shout was fearsome, but I felt a reliance on that trait now. All the soldiers quieted down with an earnest desire for an answer to their outbursts. What lies behind us in the plaza was not a part of our plan. Neither Count Canavos, the scout assigned by the moth to alter science, nor I, Molly Callisto, creator of the Ovine Replica, are responsible for what that beast has brought forth today. It slipped out of our control, but now the Count is going to be the one to put things back in order. One last time, a mission I didn't sign up for was thrust upon me. Me? With both our corrupt king and all forms of scientific alteration eliminated, this city will finally be at peace. She looked back to me and lowered her voice. Surely you can handle that, can't you? What makes you say that? I think Otis is trying to tell you something. I already know I have no hope of making amends with that child after becoming such a disappointment to him. But in you, he sees something else. You're someone he's found himself, depending on, perhaps too much. You're the only one who can reach him now. She wasn't honestly expecting me to tame that sorry son of a bitch, was she? She wanted me to have a reassuring little chat with the cretin who took my sister in hopes of calming him down and getting him back on our side? She faced the soldiers again and spoke to them. Our leads point to him being within the palace. We will be off now. And although it may be late for us to rely on that power again in a literal sense, give your best wishes to account. Every soldier drew their sword to raise to the sky. They eliminated the silence holding the streets with their cries echoing in unison. Account, 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 account. All of them stepped aside to allow Melanie and I to ride forth on the final stretch of road towards the palace. The closer we came, the more it towered over us. I forgot just how tall it was. Truly an impressive structure. Its sharp, imposing, immaculate design made me wonder again how long it took to construct, who was responsible for it, if I could have been the feat of any man. Much of the lore behind it had already been forgotten to me, but one didn't need the facts behind it to recognize it as a definitive icon of the city. Taking a glance at it from afar was enough to cement this as a fact in the eyes of anyone who dwelt here, no matter their status. Setting foot in here made the thought of confronting Otis more daunting than it would have been otherwise. Saving you a walk over here was the least I can do for you. Melanie and I hopped off the elk and stood before the grand wooden doors that served as the main entrance. Even the front door just had to go and make me feel small. Do you honestly think I'll be able to get through him? She removed the sword from her back and held it out, offering it to me. I mean, hey, I didn't say I wanted him alive, but if you're confident you can save him, I guess that works too. I reached out and took the blade into my own hand. If not, which I don't expect, then I hope you can fight. Whether or not this would be a successful endeavor, I had only one option before me. I would bring justice to Anonia this time for real. After much toil, finding my way through the rifling halls of the palace, with only one thing on mind, I made it to the very top. Aside from the overcast, nothing else was above me, other than four spires surrounding the wide, round floor at my feet, encased in an elaborately crafted metal fence. Here at the top of the world, all corners of the city, from the central to the edge, then all the woods and mountains beyond that were visible. That was the sight Otis gazed down upon. My eyes were locked on him, standing across from me with his back to me. Howdy. Even at his distance, he seemed taller than I remembered. I couldn't make out much more of him, as he wore a long, vivid red cape with gleaming golden edges flowing with the breeze. What brings you here? I can ask the same of you. Why you lead me all the way out here? This is where the king resides, is it not? He turned to face me. Between his cape and the high-heeled boots, each with a touch of gold, his outfit embodied a sense of regality, yet the frills at the edge of his white dress shirt couldn't mask its improper nature, untucked, unbuttoned at the chest. You should consider it an honor to have been invited to my new home. He wanted to appear as a royal, yet practicality and comfort were still in his character. Peak here is a fitting spot for my coronation. There was no concealing the way he always talked either. It's like you wanted, Count. We reclaim the kingdom. Wait, what the hell is we supposed to mean? Right down to his use of the royal we. He was embarrassingly pompous. You and me. Who else? What are you getting at? Well, I know you're angry at me, but I have an offer to make things up to you. I'm in charge of things around this dump now, but don't you want to say in things? I don't have to be the only king. This was what he summoned me up here for. I took Melanie's sword in both hands and positioned it beside my face, aiming it at him. You said, I want your goddamn kingdom. You did. One of your strongest thoughts was that you wanted to be king. You wanted to be the one to make a difference. But above all, you wanted to be beside me. I scared you. You're worried I would get carried away and do something awful. Even then, you accepted me as I was. You saw past the part of me that anyone else would see as ugly. You wanted my comfort. And you still wanted everything else I was able to give you. This whole time I was taking everything you wanted into consideration. Although I may have gone a little too far in choosing your sister over my own first. My bad. Either way, neither Carol nor Melanie were the kind of person you are. I remember when we first met, you generally saw something in me, but that's why I saw something in you. From the very beginning, you told me there was a thing or two you like. First thing you wished for was to get back part of yourself, even if that didn't work out. Then I read your mind and I realized you felt alone in your struggles. So I'm glad you were able to appreciate all I wanted to give you. Finally, I was able to give back to you the world. Out of nowhere, he had quite the mouth on him, trying to deliver this twisted soliloquy to me. Nonetheless, I listened intently in search of anything salvageable at all in his reasoning. Go on. I'm rambling on quite a bit, aren't I? My point is, you've been through a lot. We've been through a lot. Just the kind of guy I am to still try and do something for the one person in this world who ever loved me. Love. He closed his eyes and smirked, stretched across his face. What you give to me, because of so-called love, is the hell you plan to create. He chuckled as he looked to me again. Hell? Who says it's hell? This is the world you wish for, isn't it, Count? A place where you're made free again, so long as you're in control. My very gods and avid race, So keen on believing in reality in human form, stage an alteration of science itself, that amounted to nothing but an act to abate and diminish their breed. You knew this and accepted this all for your own gain. Then, with me behind you, every step of the way, you made it to the top. For countless years, I've longed for you. Crown you as emperor, as sovereign, as king. I lowered my blade. Well, I can't see your thoughts anymore, so if you got something to say, you have to tell me everything yourself. What did you come here for, Count? Was there anything at all redeemable in him? Anything worth negotiating with him? That was what I asked myself as I made my ascent here. But his words stirred in me doubt towards my own beliefs. He wasn't right, was he? Is this what I pursued the whole time? Melanie words echoed in my mind. I didn't say I wanted him alive, but if you're confident you can save him, I guess that works too. I took a deep breath and a moment of silence in preparation to make a decision, based on everything I knew up to this point, to make amends. Otis. I'm listening. It was like he already saw through my intent as my stern gaze faded. He approached me one step at a time as I resumed. I hate to admit it, but I think you might be right. I came because I had to see your face again. I wanted to make amends with you. I spread my hand holding Melanie's blade out to my side. I couldn't see myself being the one to kill you of all people. In spite of my initial anger at him, I wanted to be able to forgive him. I'm glad to hear that. He stood before me and put a hand to my chin, tilting it up for my eyes to meet his. What about everyone else? Who? Not, not all at once, though. We wouldn't be kings if no one was around for us to rule over. So he was insisting on me ruling alongside him. You've honestly let me be a king. Well, I'm the one with all the power now, so I get dibs on everything by default. I'll have to make up for your slack. I doubted I would have been able to handle all of that power on my own, so I was more than happy for him to take some of it and manage it for me. His fingers trailed all over my face in steady, haphazard pattern. Even now, you depend on me. I assumed a chuckle from the depths of my heart to humor him. It would have been more insane of me to have opposed him than to accept the grace bestowed upon me. We were in the same situation. With everything taken from me, he was all that remained. Just come back to me. I'm right here, my little king. He leaned in, put both of his hands to my cheeks, closed his eyes, and put his mouth to mine. I didn't move an inch as he nibbled at my lips. I was staring right at him while he begged for a passionate exchange. I couldn't reciprocate anything, yet couldn't reject anything. I went numb, ignoring his affection. Though I was still unable to return his kiss, I finally put my arms underneath his and pulled myself closer to him. For that, the movements of his mouth became sloppier, almost uncomfortable as I merely stood there. He took his face away to whisper to me, Tell me what you want before I go hungry again. Tonight is a special night, if only because every night is special. That's the kind of feeling I can't help but get when I'm around Otis. For such an occasion, I had to put on my best suit, if not because it was professional for some of my status, and because I wanted to look nice. As always, Otis is adorned in his signature regal wear. Looks comfortable on him. I only hope comfort is what he feels here. And now, on another day of leisure, I sit at the bar, atop the stool right beside him. The peacemaker is especially lively tonight, at least in the sense that many people are gathered here. However, they don't move. They don't speak. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to say. I imagine they don't fear the two of us as they should. If I were them, I wouldn't want to be in the same room as me or Otis either. They're only here because we want them to be. The sight of a crowd gathered in a restaurant takes me back to memories of simpler days. Days when I wasn't overflowing with this much fortune. I was poor once, but my status now makes even my time after joining the old police force look like poverty. And for Otis, of course, the crowd means the same thing here as it does anywhere else. Food. Wow, this one looks delicious. I ordered sick again. Been a coward, time and time again, for not committing to trying anything else on the menu. But the unique way the cooks here season their steak makes it too good to pass up. The cooks are worth keeping around for that reason. On Otis's plate is a portion much more sizable than mine. Aside from the irresistible taste, it takes a lot to keep his kingdom in check. I know he's going to lick his plate clean. While my steak displays the same brown tint his meal, unrecognizable as food at a glance, is composed of sliced sections of a bright pink meat with scarlet puddle that settled at the bottom of his plate. While I cut into my food, I see out of the corner of my eye that he goes for it with his hands. They are then exchanged for claws. Still, you won't even use a fork. Maybe I'm too hard on him, but surely it wouldn't hurt him to be a little more civilized here and there. Civilized like the old days. He speaks to me with his mouth full, and in that moment I cannot tell just who I am listening to, as his voice shifts in tone and quality. Old habits dying hard. The fork is too slow for me anyway. And once you're done, you're still going to start on the others here, the old-fashioned way. Some of the people here aren't talking or moving, not just because they're afraid. Some are hanging from the hooks, at the earning of the walls, that one of the signifiers of any joint that Otis and I have declared our own. Yeah, it's still fun to me. Alright then. You get along well. We rarely fight. That could be because I never cared to bother confronting him. But there isn't much worth confronting him over. He's such a pleasant man. I take a sip from my tea to calm myself as I feel an inexplicable disconsolation overcome me. You'll see the steak that tastes reminds me of the past. It's been a while since you had tea, hasn't it? Is what all you drink these days? His voice shifts back to its usual qualities. I say that since I never had a chance to drink it straight from the glass before I met you. You wouldn't get it, but I tell you what, it's good stuff. Just then he lifts the wine glass beside his plate, though the liquid he sips is much brighter shade of red, brighter from the violet tint common in wine. Bitter but simple, like it should be. That's the sort of taste I go for. Part of the reason I stay away from the stomach, whereas this is concentrated and clean, that has a really sour taste saturated and a ready gross blend of things someone's eaten. But if you're careful, you can find some good stuff nearby in the meat of the ribs. Although it's a bit tricky to reach between them, you can't really chew on the bones. There's a lot you can get from the legs and arms. They're so meaty. I really like that first soldier I ate after I met you because he was... I slam a fist on the bar, which Otis flinches. He's avoiding my word now. I told you to never mention that pan again. Sorry. Remember, it's only you and me now. Of course. The sound of his chewing is made audible by the silence throughout the rest of the restaurant. I'm so focused on my own meal that it doesn't bother me. With as much security as I have now, there isn't much at all that disturbs me anymore. His messy eating is simply something I learned to get over. As much as I sip at my tea, I can't take my mind off the thought of the man who Otis just brought up. Black tea, well done steak, a crowded restaurant. That man. Memories of my past are flooding back to me, Despite that, I have no reason to yearn for them. Everything I ever wanted is right here. Black tea, well done steak, a crowd in a restaurant, and a man beside me. Yet for a second there, I had to ask myself if what the two of us have created, if what I've created, is only a replica of my past. Nonsense. Both of us finish our meals. Notice faces me with a smile that snaps me out of melancholy, complete with the red stains around his mouth that remind me of all he's done for me. As good as always. Well, what's for breakfast? Once in a while, he likes to take a moment to taste flesh for the sake of it, rather than to preserve the status quo we established. It won't be until tomorrow that we continue to build upon our paradise. I looked to him with a grin across my face. Whatever you desire, my king. To stop you. Otis. I'm listening. It was like he already saw through my intent as my stern gaze faded. He approached me one step at a time as I resumed. Do you want to know what I wish for? Yeah. I raised my sword to him. I wish I had never met you. I wish I had left you to rot in the prison you deserved. He stopped and gave me a dumbstruck look. Eh? You reject them all offer? Not just that. I'm taking the city back for myself. You can go to hell. He looked at me with wide eyes, though he shouldn't have been surprised, and lunged at him ready to kill. This was it. As I took a swing towards him, he stepped to the side, turning to him and swinging once more, and he dodged my blow again. His movements were as clumsy and ungainly as ever, yet he continued to find a way around me. Count. This would be the last time I heard my name from him. Each time I heard it, I thought he was expecting me to say something attuned to my desires. In truth, he was only begging something from me. I would be demanded of no more. I kept swinging. He refused to retaliate, only jumping around my swings and thrusts. I shouldn't have been that hard to hit him, shouldn't it? Before this, he was always on the slow side, and his size should have made him an easy target. I had to ask myself if there was a reason he wasn't outright fleeing the scene as I chased him in circles around the palace rooftop. Maybe he was just that determined to get me on his side again, as foolish as it was to think I'll ever go back to him. If not for that reason, then the better question to ask was, why didn't he try to fight back and stop me from attacking him? He had the power, didn't he? Out of nowhere, something appeared in front of me, preventing me from advancing. Taking a step back, I realized it was a thin wall of stone, just as tall as me and barely wider than me. Rising from the floor I stood on, this had to have been the work of scientific alteration. I maneuvered around the wall to catch sight of Otis again. He stood in place, so now was my chance. I lunged at him again, though something struck my knee, causing me to lose balance and trip forward. Getting a scratch or two, I pushed against the ground to catch myself and avoid landing flat. To do so, I had to drop the sword. I noticed it began shaking on its own, almost as if threatening to leave my side. I reached for the handle as I scurried back onto my feet, and so the sword became still under my control once more. Otis must have wished to take it from me then. Yet that didn't persist. We resumed our dance around the alterations to the floor that arose in his desire to escape or defend against my assault. We both grew tired as we stood right across from each other, panting and staring into each other's eyes. With our brows lowered, it appeared as if we had been in an intense battle. Though I was the one doing all the fighting, at least I tried to fight him. We took a deep breath and straightened out our postures, standing upright to prepare for another bout. He took a wide stance in preparations to make a dash from me, but I didn't move. In frustration, I swung my arm and slammed my sword against the pillar of stone beside me. A thick clang echoed throughout the air, as his body jolted with his flicking ears. I was right. I swung against the pillar again as if to show off my aggression. Otis stopped, raised his hand slightly with his fingers bent, and cocked his ears back. Ow. That was it. I took another swing at the pillars for good measure and charged at him again. He flinched again, but he had to run from me. As I chased him down, I took swings all the while against every anomaly of stone I passed. That was enough to deter him from creating any more formations. It hurt my ears too, but the pain was something I had to bear for the sake of my strategy. While I was somewhat concerned over the possibility of going deaf, Otis plucked his ears as he stumbled away from me. He began to slow down. He couldn't match my nimble body and the years of experience I had as a cop. How could he have been as agile as he was to dodge my blows at the beginning of this battle? Though I presumed as much that was because he wished to be so. That must have meant his power was running low. I kept at it. He was sluggish. Suddenly, the screech of grinding metal echoed across the battlefield. From where? Looking around, I realized the only thing around, made of metal aside from my sword, was the fence enclosing us. It broke apart, and the scattered segments flew towards me. Now I was the one on the run as I ducked around the pillars and walls of the terrain Otis created in order to escape the rain of fire from the weapon he imagined. I thought we would have kept up the game of running until he got tired enough for me to catch up and strike him down. It was about time he bothered to fight back. I guess he was done trying to entice or forgive me. He knew well at this point that I wasn't about mercy. Sitting under cover, however, I noticed that one of the fence that remained uprooted and floating wasn't after me anymore. Everything else fell to the floor in a final array of dull chimes. I peeked out from around the wall I hid behind. There stood Otis, wearing a distraught expression. In his hand he held what resembled a sword, but was a blade of a design cruder than even Melanie's. He summoned the formation of metal from the fence into one space to hold something serviceable as a weapon. It had its own sort of elegance in its disarray, assembly of intertwining posts and weaves of steel. This showcased its fragility. He looked to me with a slight scowl, unlike the carefree character I had come to know in him. This had to have been his last line of defense, yet he still didn't wish for me dead outright. Wouldn't that have been the simplest choice if he gave up trying to make amends with me? Then I remembered what it was I wished for earlier. Do whatever the hell you want, just don't involve me ever again, you monster. Not only did I allow him to manually alter science, but while also preventing him from reading my mind, I protected myself from any alteration he could wish upon me. He couldn't take my sword so long as it was in my grasp, because I was perceived it as a part of me, essentially to defend myself here. I stepped forth to confront Otis as he raised his makeshift blade. It comes down to this, huh? This city is mine. This city is mine. This city would become mine. I kept that in mind for one last dose of self-empowerment. Standing before him, I gripped the hilt of my blade with both hands, took a heavy swing at Otis. With both hands, he raised his own blade against mine and staggered back as my blow threw his posture off. I knew immediately that I had the upper hand. I took my time taking another swing at him. He rushed to shift positions and guard again. The same thing happened. He took a step back. The fear in his eyes was plain. I stepped forth and did the same thing as last time. And again. Once more. His flushed face was drenched in sweat. He voiced his panting aloud all the while. I got a kick out of toying with him like this. What a laughable, anticlimactic confrontation. I should have known not to expect much of Otis when he held no power. Just then, seeing my hesitation, he gave himself a chance to reach to me. Count, don't say my name like that. We shared the dream, didn't we? His tone was meek and feeble. No longer. Vividly, I remember a nightmare. Above all, I remember that you were in it. You've been in many of my nightmares. Sometimes, however, they're pleasant dreams. That is, until I wake up. Time and time again, I thought the same thing of him. Time and time again, I thought the same thing of him. Now was the time to end the nightmare. One last time. I swung. He guarded, and he lost balance. Then, faster than last time, I repositioned my sword. Aimed for the opening I saw, and pierced Otis. A gasp was the only thing he could release as the blade sunk into the top of his abdominal cavity, and a stain of scarlet spread across his white shirt. I almost forgot that even beasts bleed. He let out a grunt as I withdrew the blade and sent a splatter across the ground. Clutching his chest, he fell to his knees. It wasn't long before he coughed a few droplets of blood. Count. He muttered my name like always underneath that coarse voice. There was nothing more I could do for his sake. I had done all I could for him. I gave him the gift he was unable to return to me. Release. He fell onto his back. I know he wanted to look up to me, though his gaze was slipping as his eyes shook. Account. There was nothing more to say, and yet a sense of regret crept up to me. It was as if I wanted to say something, but couldn't find any words good enough for him. I'm sorry. Forgive me one day. He closed his eyes. No, I'm sorry. I don't know why a tear rolled down my cheek. I came here only to complete the task that had to be done. Save the city. I did what was right, and I felt remorse. He had to be eliminated, did he not? When I found Noah dead, I couldn't bear to witness him. Now I couldn't withdraw my gaze that fell upon Oris's body, while I stood, as motionless as he lay. With his eyes shut and his hands overlapped above the wound I gave him, he appeared at peace. Perhaps I did what was right in the end. I did what simply had to be done. But before that, what I did was all wrong. The words in his speech before our battle had a weight to them. People were sacrificed for me to make it here. But even before I took his life, Otis was already my sacrifice. He was my means to an end. Finally, the deed is complete, reaching its logical conclusion. Along with the city I have taken you. Grant my final wish. Thank you. The peacemaker is especially lively tonight. Lots of people are gathered around me, all making a ruckus among themselves. No conversation is quite as everyone has to talk over each other to be heard by anyone. They're all gathered here in celebration. Everyone is overjoyed over the fall of the master order trained higher. Well, it's a relief that the government will be reformed for the better, perhaps this time for real. I must be the only one here who isn't celebrating seriously. I only wanted dinner. Sitting at the bar alone, I sipped from a glass of red wine. A drink new to my repertoire, but I suddenly felt like trying. I finished my meal a long time ago. I only want to take in the taste of the drink while I'm here. It's not like I have anywhere else to go. I have my house back, but only my belongings are there. I live alone now. Noah's gone. Carol's gone. Otis is gone. No one in the restaurant will know the price I paid for them to experience the joy they share now. Never again will I feel her skin. Never again. Words of encouragement. Never again will I fall asleep beside him. Never again will I see her vigor at the end of term. Never again will I see his little smile after the worst of days. And all those were things that still applied to one who would never be more than my coworker. Though for some reason, not the one in the front of my mind now. However, I still know one person, though she's become less cold to me. She's not who I would call a friend. At the very least, I can depend on her. She supplied me with some of my needs, here and there, though that isn't much. The person sitting at the stool beside me gets up and walks off. After a moment passes, that's when she shows up and takes the spot beside me. Oh, you've given wine a try. My sister loved that drink. Try not to let it take you over. It may be good for you in small doses, but anything can be abused. My fear already took me over. Its color became as inviting to me as your brother's eyes. So that's how you felt, huh? I figured. You're even wearing his jacket and ribbon now. It was first my father's jacket. I can't be bothered to get pedantic with her. I came to associate with Otis just as much, if not more than my father. A more prominent memory of my father lay in his other uniform. I haven't seen its last owner since his activity died down. As for the red ribbon placed underneath the collar of my shirt, that's something for both my sister and the man I came to know after freeing both of them. The bartender approaches Melanie. What can I get for you? Coffee, black, please. While he struggles to tend to the other customers, it's an unheard of record for his service tonight. It's like Melanie has a certain charm that made the bartender rush to her, even though he likely isn't informed of her new status. It doesn't take him long to bring back to her a steaming cup of coffee on a saucer, before darting back off to deal with everyone else. Thank you. Facing ahead, she tilts her head to me. I imagine he felt the same way towards you, didn't he? I don't know what he felt in the end. His dying words, however, are what fill me the most regret. So it may have been safe to assume he remained loyal to who I was, even as I took his life. In the end, he was who allowed me to follow my desires, however ambitious they were. I hope not, honestly. Knowing of any resentment he held for me would ease my regret. I see. A silence fell upon us as we sipped our drinks. Count, you never come around the office, or even the palace. Do you have no interest in what I've been trying to do for this city ever since I took the throne? I can't say I do, but I can't find it in me to reject her show of interest for me. I'm sure you're doing a fine job. I wonder if she only sees me as an asset after I was the one to do the dirty work and take down Otis for her sake. You're welcome to offer some suggestions. You know, tell me if you ever have anything in your mind. Will do. What I have is enough for me. Not much more would be able to improve my life. As it is in stagnation, I've fallen into acceptance of my circumstances. I'm not sure I can find someone else in this vast world who can comfort me like Otis did. But I suppose, even if such a thing were never to come again, I'll have to make do. Nonetheless, as I think upon it, as vain of a wish as it is, I wish I had a chance to go back and fix some mistakes I've made. If I simply approached my circumstances with a different mindset, perhaps I could have done something to change what became of me. Perhaps I could have saved Kara. And perhaps I could have even... No, Otis is a creature beyond salvation. Alas, it's too late now. All that's left is to ponder upon countless short-lived ifs. I go back to the taste of wine before me to get my mind off things. It could be your city too. You're not slacking off on your newfound reign just because you're lazy, are you? It's almost comfort to me to hear this. Don't sell yourself short. You set an example for me, Count. Dare I say you've surpassed me in everything you've accomplished. I had my doubts about you when I met you, but you turned out fine. Maybe Eureka was right in a weird way. If there's anyone who can set things straight, it's you. Not only is the last person I expect a consolation from, but I'll take it. Thanks. We left out Choco before going to her coffee. And at my side, opposite Lonely, someone stands from their seat and leaves their presence. Just then, a girl takes that person's place. I recognize her. I've seen her short dark hair, her small frail figure more than enough times. She wears a pale blue dress, as if tidied up to join in on the festivities. Yet she comes alone. Over the crowd, I can barely make out her conversation with the bartender, and for whatever reason, it catches my attention. Welcome. You here to join the celebration too? Celebration? You know, lots of people who all wanted to be free of the mob flocked here, right? Plenty of them have been coming to regroup here since the mob fell. And the business has been booming. That's lovely, yes. I can tell you the mob were a bit of a problem for me as well. I don't know about festivities as much as simply getting my mind off of things. I imagine as much. Her voice strikes me as putting on a guise of enthusiasm. To mask her dismay, I assume recent circumstances must have been hard on her, although what she's gone through can't amount to a fraction of my hardship. I came here with a few friends, a time or two. I don't know what they're up to now, but I wanted to stop by here for their sake. Then thanks for stopping by. Now can I get you a drink? I'll just take hot tea, green. I can barely hear her over the rising commotion before she quiets down once the bartender fetches her steaming cup of water and a tea bag on a saucer. It would be rude of me to intrude on her silence, and that's just what happened to her. I need my silence just as much, so I leave her to her drink as I return to my own. That's when Melanie speaks up. Nothing at all, huh? Don't worry about me, Melanie. I don't need anything. I guess it's all mine for the taking then, huh? A faint smile stretches across Melanie's face as she closes her eyes and lifts her head. What a pain.